Greetings and welcome to Productive DeFi. So in our last lesson, we learned about DEXs, which allow us to exchange one cryptocurrency for a different cryptocurrency on the network that we're connected to. And in this video, now that we understand DEXs, you're going to be able to understand liquidity pools much easier. So let's go ahead and let's jump in and learn about liquidity pools. So I'm here again on the Sushi protocol, sushi.com. And this time, instead of transacting from one cryptocurrency to another and paying the fees that we were, what we're going to do is we're going to understand how we can participate and actually earn those fees. So if I come over here to pools, we're going to discover all of the liquidity pools that exist here on Sushi Swap. So if I come down here, I'm going to go ahead though, just to filter this up a bit because they have so many networks and we want to reduce our fees and not use the Ethereum network. We're going to go ahead and just look at the Avalanche network for now since we're familiar with that one, even though all of the other networks and interacting with this protocol are largely identical. So you already have the skills to do that. But just to simplify things, let's narrow it down to the Avalanche protocol. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to locate an opportunity where we can earn some money. So let's go ahead and let's scroll down through here and you can see that the amount that you can earn on these liquidity pools, it can be quite high or quite low depending on the asset that you locate. So let's go ahead and let's scroll through here and let's choose something that looks good. Now they're organized here by total value locked, which is the total amount of funds that people have basically locked into the liquidity pool. And the reason that's important is because generally the higher that the total value locked is, means that more people trust the exchange that's set up. So you can hear there's two stablecoins, USDC.E and then just the USDC. And you can see that that has the most liquidity value locked. And the reason that is because a lot of people are smart and understand that, these are stable coins, so the value is not going to change. So they can just earn a 1% APR on it, and they can capture all of the fees that are being transacted between these two coins. And they pretty much can't lose the face value of the money that they put in. So you can see there's a lot of liquidity locked up here for the exchange of the USDC.E and the USDC. But I want to do something different since we've already transacted with stablecoins. I want to jump into something that is not a stablecoin just for fun, just so we can do something different. And since I see there's like a 19.19% yield here, for the AVAX, which as we already know, we're familiar with that token because we have some AVAX. AVAX is the main token on the Avalanche network, and that's what we also pay our network fees in. And then we also have the MIM, and if we go and investigate this pair here, what we can do is we can head over to this contract and see which contract this is. This is the Magic Internet Money. So this is another stable coin, but it's a new one that we haven't used before. And we have a pair where it's one stable coin and another coin that is not stable. Because if we take a look at the AVAX coin, you'll see that the value fluctuates here. Here, let me show you that on CoinMarketCap so you can see the chart. So it's going to be fun because instead of just setting up stable coins like we did before, now we're going to have a pair where one is a cryptocurrency that changes value that supports the entire Avalanche network. So obviously this is a very high in demand cryptocurrency, right? Because if people want to use the Avalanche network just like we did, we have to acquire AVAX. So obviously AVAX is in high demand. And as we can see, the Magic Internet Money coin, which is another stable coin, which is pegged to $1 here. And I'll show you that here on CoinMarketCap as well. So this is a stable coin that's pegged to $1. Again, it fluctuates slightly because the protocol is constantly trying to balance it, keeping it close as it can to $1. We know it's in high demand because we're seeing quite a high APR, which means a lot of people are transacting between the AVAX and the Magic Internet Money coin. So that makes a lot of sense, right? Because people are probably going to have AVAX from the Avalanche network, and then they probably want to buy the MIM coin. So they're transferring one asset over to another. So this has got to be pretty popular. And then when they want to go back to using the network and get out of their position in MIM, then they're going to have to transfer back into AVAX. So what's happening here in liquidity pools always consist of two or more assets that you put into a pool. And then just like before where we were on the DEX and we were trading one coin for another, what the liquidity pool is a way to put that funds up to allow people to do that. So in other words, we would put up some MIM of our own and some AVAX, and every time that somebody comes to Sushi Swap and they go and they transact from AVAX to MIM or vice versa, we will capture a fee when they trade between these two currencies. Whichever way they decide to transact will actually earn that fee. So this is the pool, and currently it's yielding about 18.6% yield. So that's a very high yield, much higher than we saw in the lending and borrowing protocols before. And you're able to achieve higher APRs like this when you have two coins that are in high demand that people are transacting very frequently with frequent volume and demand. And so you can see here that every time somebody makes a transaction, the fee that the liquidity pool is charging is 0.3%. So anytime somebody gives us MIM and we give them some of our AVAX, we capture a 0.3% fee on that. And based on the volume of times of capturing that 0.3% fee, it's adding up right now to an 18.6% APR if volume stays the same as it is right now and demand for these coins transacting stays in demand. And so that's an important lesson because, as I said, AVAX is always going to be in demand and MIM is currently in demand, which that could change, but it's very unlikely that AVAX popularity will change because it's the main network coin. So there's probably always going to be some demand for switching into AVAX. So the real question is whether or not MIM will remain a popular coin or if it will fade out over time. But that's all part of the research process that I cover in the research portion of this course. But for now, we're just going to take it as face value and say like, yeah, this is definitely popular now, and we're going to trade it. And if it becomes not popular later, maybe we'll get out of this liquidity pool. But yeah, let's just go ahead and take it at face value for now and just learn the concept of liquidity pools by supplying some liquidity to this pool. And then that way, anytime somebody makes a transaction, instead of having to pay the fees, we're going to be the ones collecting the fees and racking up some high APR. So in order to add liquidity to this pool, a liquidity pool always wants to have a 50-50 ratio. So what we want to do is we want to get the equal value in MIM and an equal value in AVAX, and then we want to loan that out. So we want like $50 in MIM and $50 in AVAX. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to acquire those coins first, so that way we can add them to the liquidity pool, and then we will participate in the liquidity pool. So there's a couple ways that we could acquire these coins. One of them is that we could obviously just go to Coinbase and we could try to purchase these coins directly and then send them over to our wallet, but we already know how to do that. Another way is that we could take some of the existing coins that we have and we could swap them here on the DEX. So those are two very viable ways that you can get the funds needed to supply to the liquidity pool. What we're trying to basically just do is acquire MIM coin and acquire AVAX coins and have an equal portion between the two, so that way we can add to the liquidity pool. It doesn't matter how we get those coins. But again, you already know two techniques: using something like Coinbase to purchase your coins, or using something like a DEX to exchange some of your existing coins to acquire MIM. But I'm going to show you a third technique. Some of my previous lessons, I've introduced new concepts as we've gone along. And so I want to take the opportunity to introduce you to a new concept here as well. I'm going to take the Avi protocol that we had before, where we started lending out on the Avalanche network. We ended up lending out this DAI.e. And we can see that, unfortunately, the APY has changed over the last few days because there is no longer as high of a demand. So we're earning less APY. And we know that over here in the liquidity pool, we can earn up to 18.6%. So a lot of people actually do what I'm about to show you. And so I'm going to teach you a third way. If we look in our wallet, we only have about $4 of AVAX, which is not that much money. And as you know, with our lending and borrowing protocol, we can actually borrow. So let's go ahead and I'm going to introduce you to a concept which is known as leveraging, which means we're going to borrow assets and then we're going to use the borrowed assets to then put into a liquidity yield and earn a high APR. So as you can see, we can borrow these assets for 5%, but when we add them to the liquidity pool of our choosing, we can actually earn up to 18.6%. So what we're going to do is we're going to leverage ourselves, which can be very dangerous. And again, none of this is financial advice. This is for educational purposes only, to show you how I do things and how other people commonly do things on blockchain. But you definitely want to take this with a grain of salt. If you feel safer, you could definitely just use coins that you purchase from Coinbase, or you could swap some of your coins over using a DEX to get the coins that you need without using any leverage. But I just want to take this opportunity to educate you on another way that DeFi is commonly used. So I'm going to go ahead and borrow this AVAX. Now, I don't necessarily want to borrow the max because that will put me really close to the liquidation threshold. So again, I'm going to try to reduce this. Maybe I'll buy 2 AVAX, which has a US value of $43. I'm going to get a little bit more though, actually. So let's get closer to $50. So I'm going to go ahead and acquire this, and we're going to borrow the AVAX. Network fees are very low again on Avalanche, so this is nice. And so note again that here in my Avalanche wallet, I only have about $4. So let's go ahead and let's borrow it, and we should see our value of our wallet increase significantly to about 50 bucks. Okay, and all done. So let's go ahead and let's look in our wallet and just confirm that we have that 50 bucks. So here in our tokens, you can see our AVAX is up to $54, and that's because we're borrowing it now. Now we are paying that 5% yield, which could be fairly expensive in some regards, but when we consider that we're going to take it and we're going to earn about an 18% APR, what we're actually going to be doing is, so 18.6% APR minus the 5% APY that we're borrowing from is going to be roughly 13.6% APR that we're going to be earning. So this will actually still be profitable even though we're borrowing at 5% for the AVAX. Now the other thing here that we need is we need to get the MIM coin. So we've acquired one of our assets, and we were able to do that using no additional money that we had to put into our account. We're able to acquire that again by just simply leveraging our collateral that we already had in our wallet. So that was nice, right? We didn't actually have to purchase more money and take it out of our bank account. We just simply borrowed it. So that's pretty cool, right? Because it's just like borrowing funds from a bank, but the blockchain is the bank. And our health factor is still above 1.5, which I said is my personal limit because 1.5% would mean that we're borrowing about 50% of the value of what we have up as collateral. And so we are pretty close to that, but we're still in a healthy range so far. And we won't be liquidated unless we reach 73%. So we're only at 50 right now. So I have a decent spread right now before I'll be liquidated. But that's something that I definitely would want to avoid, and I would just keep an eye on it. And again, if I come close to liquidating, I can always put up more of my assets as collateral, or I can go ahead and repay. And that will keep me from liquidating. So now we need to acquire MIM, and we could purchase that directly from Coinbase again, or like we said, we could swap it over on a DEX. Since we just learned about DEXs, let's go ahead and swap some over on the DEX. Now we have about $50 in total AVAX, and we want to again have about a 50-50 ratio between our AVAX and our MIM. So I don't want to convert all of my AVAX. I only want to convert about half of it. So I'll convert one AVAX to get 21.85 MIM, which will be about $21. So I'll go ahead and I'll swap this, and this will have a price impact because we have to pay our network fees and the fees to the liquidity pool. But after we swap these, we'll have some MIM. So basically the action that we just took is what we're eventually going to benefit from. Every time somebody does something like that, where they swap their AVAX to MIM or the other way around, we're actually going to earn the fees. So we just paid a fee, but now we're going to become the fee owners. So this is the action that people will do that is basically going to pay us. And as you can see, in order for people to transact on the blockchain, they need to use decentralized exchanges like this. So there's a very real demand in order to facilitate this trade, especially between the main network coin and a popular stable coin. So let's head over to our pool now, and let's go ahead and let's fund our pool. So we have the liquidity pool pulled up. This is the one that we located before. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add our tokens to the liquidity pool. Now you can see that this is giving me a warning. That's because I have more AVAX funds than I do MIM. Let me pull up my wallet to show that. And MIM's not being displayed here. So let's go ahead and let's add MIM to our token as well really quickly using the method that I showed you before. Coming back over to CoinMarketCap and just hitting, and then just go into the Avalanche network and clicking add to MetaMask directly. Okay, so here you can see that I have $32 in AVAX and I have $21 in MIM. So again, with liquidity pools, you always want to deposit a 50-50 balance between the two tokens. So I'm going to need to choose MIM as my max, putting in the max amount of MIM that I have. So let me click on MIM instead of the AVAX one. And so now what I'm doing is I'm putting the full amount of MIM that I have available, which is the 21.84 cents of MIM. And then I'm going to put roughly an equal amount, $21.84, so close enough to 50% of the AVAX to get a 50-50 ratio. That's always the goal, to get basically a 50-50 ratio between the assets that you're putting into the liquidity pool. So now we just need to approve this. So we're going to add. So we're going to approve. You can see we're only paying a 4-cent fee to approve. And then we're going to click add liquidity. Add. And we only have to pay a 14-cent fee to complete that transaction. And look at that. Now our position, $43 in total. So we have $21.74 in MIM, and we have $21.95 in AVAX. So roughly a 50-50% amount that we staked. And that creates our position where we have a total of $43.72. So now every time somebody transacts on SushiSwap between either one of these tokens, either way, that fee that they pay is going to go into the liquidity pool. Our money is pooled with everyone else. And now the APR just went up a little bit and it's earning 19.19% if everything stays the same forever. Of course, things change. So these APRs may go up or they may go down based on the supply and demand of the network. And when that happens, we can always just come in here and we can remove our liquidity. We can choose to take the max or half of it or 25%. and we can cash out here from the liquidity pool. Now, when you do remove your funds from the liquidity pool, it's very possible that you might not get back the even amount of money between the two. Basically, when you cash out, you may end up with a little bit more AVAX or a little bit more MIM based on how transactions are flowing on the DEX. So how cool is that? So in this video, we just acquired a 19% yield. Now we are borrowing against a 5% APY, but that's okay with me because I'm generating such a high APR right now that I'm making up for that. But you definitely don't have to borrow funds to do this. You could have certainly just purchased them on Coinbase directly or sent them with some other method and then just put them in and earn the full 19%. But I wanted to introduce you to this more advanced concept because in blockchain, it's very common for people to leverage their assets and borrow assets and put them to work in places where they can earn a higher yield, which is pretty impressive because theoretically, imagine I only had $100 to my name. I actually am controlling $100 here that's earning APY, and I have another 50% of that. I'm borrowing $50. So essentially I'm controlling $150 here between the DAI and the AVAX. So that allows me to have 50% more money than I would have if I really only did have $100. But of course, leverage can be dangerous because if we get liquidated, we could have the DAI repossessed on us basically and be charged a liquidation fee as well. So this can be extremely risky as well. If I was in risk of being liquidated, what I would probably do is I would pull either part or all of my funds out of my liquidity pool, and I would use those to repay my loan and minimize being liquidated and charged a fee. That's what I would do if I had access to no additional funds. Now, if I had access to additional funds, I could also just add more collateral and put more funds into cryptocurrency. So again, congratulations. In this video, you learned how to use liquidity pools and earn almost a 20% APR. Now, there are other pools, and a lot of these pools do pay more money, but some of them are very unrealistic. So you can see that there's some APRs here on SushiSwap when I refresh it that are paying over 100,000%. It's just not realistic though, because as you can see that the total value locked here in this liquidity pool is only 86 cents. So basically nobody's supplying this really, and nobody's transacting this. So obviously you need to know how to do your research and make sure that you're selecting a safe opportunity. The easiest general rule is that the total value locked is a sign of what people view the safest and the most in demand. And again, I have a whole section of this course dedicated to researching, but I just wanted to give you a rough idea that some of these APRs are very unrealistic, especially the ones that only have a liquidity pool of like a penny, but they're displaying such a high APR. I would generally keep this organized by the total value locked and then search down the list for opportunities, which there's a lot to consider, which is why I have an entire section on research alone. All right, that's it for now. Get up, stretch your legs, have a coffee if you want, and I'll see you over in the next video.